Today's episode will feature a selection of real-life Tinder horror stories. We would appreciate it if you could give us a thumbs up before proceeding with the video. Moreover, in case you had any creepy encounters on Tinder or any other unsettling experiences, please reach out to us. I spent a considerable amount of time on Tinder. While I was living in Denver at the time, I resorted to using Tinder for my online dating needs. I came across his profile one day. I was taken with his pictures and found his bio to be fascinating. I opted to swipe towards the right. Upon opening the app the following morning, I was taken aback to find out that he also had feelings for me. We had a quick chat and I perceived him to be nice, funny, and intelligent. We talked about our interests, occupations, and families. We had a great rapport. Our plan for the weekend was to meet at a coffee shop in the city. I was a bit scared when I first laid eyes on him, wondering if he would be as genial in person or online. My worries vanished as soon as I laid eyes on him. His height, beauty, and friendly smile were unmatched. In my opinion, his looks were more pleasing than what was portrayed in his pictures. We embraced, chatted, drank coffee, and joked about trivial matters. I had a good conversation with him, and it felt like we had known each other for quite some time. It was our first date, and we started spending a lot of time together. We went out to eat, museums, parks, and simply wandered around the city. We talked about our aspirations in life, our fears, and our goals. However, there was a change in the situation. He used to text me a lot, even when I was at work or talking to friends. In the event that I didn't reply, he would become angry and assume I was neglecting him. Occasionally, he would come to my place without me being aware of his intentions, just to hang out and have a good time. Initially, I believed he was simply demonstrating his love. Over time, it became too much to handle and made me feel uneasy. Furthermore, whenever I attempted to bring it up with him, he would become defensive and upset. He declared that I was the only one he had in the world and could not imagine life without me. He accused me of trying to flirt with other guys, but later admitted that I didn't love him. It became a challenge for me to be careful with everything I said or did around him. I couldn't enjoy being alone, spending time with my friends, or doing things I enjoyed without feeling guilty. Receiving his calls became unappealing to me. He never seemed to give me any guarantees about anything he might ask or say. It made me feel drained. One day, he made a visit to my workplace. He entered to look for me. When I requested his departure, he began to scream and create a significant issue. My work colleagues had to contact security to get him out. It was a truly humiliating experience. My boss was incredibly understanding, which is fortunate. In hindsight, I might be ejected, but his response was one of, "Shut up." No one at work mentioned it again after that. I have great respect for all of my colleagues. I was aware that it was time to break up with him. I tried to soften the situation by telling him something on the phone, but he didn't want to hear it. He persistently urged me to give him another chance. I never do that again. I had a gut feeling that things would not improve. Subsequently, he sent more and more messages. Initially, they were just poignant messages that conveyed his deep affection and desire for me. Subsequently, they transformed into unsettling indices. He shared pictures of me and my friends on social media and conveyed his knowledge of the location and intent to monitor us. In order to see me, he would come and visit places where I was already well acquainted. I was frightened and didn't have any choice. Despite my efforts to prevent his phone calls, he kept on creating new ones. Despite my attempts to contact the police, they informed me that their options were limited unless he had caused me harm. I know, it sounds crazy. While alone at home, I heard a noise outside my apartment while watching TV. I reached the window and spotted him standing there, staring at me. Upon feeling extremely scared, I locked the doors and windows and alerted the police. He was taken into custody by the police upon their arrival. After spending the night in jail, I discovered that he was heavily intoxicated. The following day, he was set free. Following the incident, a restraining order was issued against me. Subsequently, things improved considerably. It's possible that he was afraid of being caught up in law, or it could be that his friends and family had already talked to him. Whatever it was, I'm glad things didn't get out of hand. Even after 2 years, I'm still anxious about encountering him in some other location. Despite its lack of initiality, I gave Tinder a go in 2015. I was taken aback by the number of matches I got when I started swiping. My chances of getting 3 or 4 matches were not as good as I had initially hoped. Carol, who had long curly hair, was a stunning beauty among them. Our conversation was successful from the outset, leading us to meet at a local park in our area. I went to the park early on our first date. It was a pleasant day. The sun was shining brightly. The park was quiet with only a few families and couples in attendance. I sat on a bench in the vicinity of our scheduled rendezvous. As time went by, I began to feel uneasy. Despite her tardiness, I was constantly on the lookout for information on whether she had canceled or disappeared. After a while, the sun disappeared, and I got up to go back home when I heard footsteps behind me. The sun setting was followed by a massive shadow. 3 men approached me when I turned around. They looked like they were about 25 years old, and 2 of them were quite sizable. The closer they came, the more anxious I felt. "Hey there, would you be willing to give me some money as an alternative?" "Sorry, I don't have any money left," I said. 2 of the guys stopped me from leaving when I tried to. Someone inquired if I could examine your wallet. I retreated in my attempt to avoid their presence. I declared that there would be no complications. I made an effort to avoid them, but they didn't let me get close. Rather than moving away, they came closer to me and one of them gripped my arm. I endeavored to break free, but his hold was resolute. 2 other men were positioned around me. I was aware that I needed to act swiftly. With an adrenaline rush, I swung my free arm around one of the guys and connected with them. He stumbled back, clutching his nose. I rushed away from them as quickly as I could. I saw them trying to catch up, but I could run at a faster pace. Eventually, when I stopped exhaling deeply and tried to catch my breath, I realized I wasn't sure where I was. I found myself in a city that had never been to my experience, with no familiar spots. I tapped into my phone to see where I was and what it took to get back to my flat. In the end, I was able to pinpoint my location using a map. I dialed an Uber to avoid the fear of being found by the same men as I, who were walking me back home. I was extremely embarrassed by the incident and attempted to act as though it was a minor issue. I had a feeling that Carol was not genuine at the time. I had the impression that those individuals created a fake account to take my money. The thought was not a wise one, as I only had $20 or $30 in cash, and they didn't receive it. Carol sent me a new message on Tinder, which caught me off guard. She mentioned that she had a family emergency and needed to take her father to the hospital. Initially, I was uncertain about what took place. Did she really send me a text message, or was she trying to confuse me once more? It's possible that the individual was displeased. I concealed him, and he could be seeking revenge. I opted to send her a message and inquire about the incident, so I took the chance and asked for more information. It's a lengthy tale. My dad had a heart attack and we had to rush him to hospital. It was a highly charged experience. I'm at a loss for words. I couldn't believe it. I was confident that those 3 men were responsible for it. Nevertheless, I didn't hold her responsible solely for the sake of accuracy. I eliminated her and let go of any involvement. Furthermore, I was too embarrassed to seek police intervention. My lack of knowledge in finding those individuals meant that it was not likely to be helpful. The situation came to an abrupt end. But a few months later, I was walking near my house when I saw one of those individuals getting off the bus. He didn't catch a glimpse of me. The presence of those guys still made it feel unsettling. I'm not going to disclose my identity or where I reside, but I want to share information about myself and my former boyfriend. A 23-year-old man from the country is a native. Despite meeting on Tinder in the summer of 2018, we only started talking in September. He seemed like a typical guy to me, and we both had some mutual affection. It wasn't long before I realized that I was completely mistaken. During our date in September, he had to drive me away from his hometown. During our conversations, he would frequently cry and express his admiration for his ex-girlfriend. The first indication was that. I attempted to soothe him, but he was extremely upset and could not be comforted. Subsequently, we entered an empty parking lot, and he began crying once more. He was sobbing as he hit his steering wheel. The second omen was that. I inquired about his condition when he was in tears and suddenly appeared to be dejected without any apparent cause. Our relationship lasted for only 1 month, but since we lived in different towns, it was a long-distance relationship. He would phone me almost every day, crying over his ex-girlfriend and how much he missed her. He persistently inquired about the means to get her to engage in conversation with him again. Whenever I saw him, I made sure to tell him that he wasn't a bad person and that she probably still loved him. Our second date took place later that month, and we decided to go to his house, which was located about 3 hours away. He called me repeatedly while I was in the shower. I called him back within a few minutes. Upon exiting, I apologized to myself as I was in the shower. Is everything in the right place? I don't care where you were, but next time, we need to make plans and you should answer the phone. I was taken aback, and it really disturbed me. I felt a sense of guilt for not initiating the conversation, so I decided to spend time with him. To say that his house was untidy would be an understatement. Our relationship deteriorated following that. He once drove by his ex-girlfriend's house to check if she was still with him, feeling the absence of her. He phoned me to complain, and I suggested that she might not have been home when he called. It's possible that she was at work or in school. He would yell at me whenever I tried to stand up for myself. When I tried to soothe him, he would become more anxious. He would call me back repeatedly if I didn't hang up. He would also compare me to his ex-girlfriend, but he always denied the comparison every time I mentioned it. He would say things like, "I aspire to be with her. She had the ability to discuss deeply personal matters." He would frequently mention that she was his soulmate during our conversations, and she deserved to be there in the end. Despite my efforts to cease communication with him, he persistently kept me guessing and said that I only need your assistance. One day, while I was discussing my feelings towards his behavior, he responded by saying that it's not as bad as people think. At some point, I broke down in tears, and he accused me of trying to manipulate him by crying. There were instances where he would abruptly stop talking on the phone and become upset after I made an unsettling comment, but remained silent. Ironically, he has recently started accusing his ex-girlfriend of being abusive. After hearing that he wasn't interested in my problems, I blocked him and stopped talking to him. I won't disclose too many details for the sake of privacy. Keep in mind that I was approximately 18 years old. I was skeptic. Nonetheless, I wish you the best in terms of assistance. Please don't approach me. After ending a 4-year relationship, I was craving for something different. Like any 23-year-old who lives alone, I snuck on Tinder and started doing so. After a few days, I came across someone on Tinder. He's known as Casey. My ex and Casey were completely unlike each other. He had tattoos on his body and was extremely strong. After a month of being out with each other, this took place. Despite my fondness for him because of the kind gestures and affection he showed me, I was determined to be in a relationship with him. His presence was acknowledged by the man who told me he had been in jail for 9 years, where felony charges such as theft and physical violence were brought against him. Despite seeing some warning signs, I chose to ignore them. My 23-year-old mind didn't even consider the possibility of him having caused harm to someone before. My sole focus was on being with him. My intention was to assist him in getting his life back on track. Nevertheless, the situation turned out to be dissimilar. He had a problem with some bad things, and I was doing everything in my power to help him quit. Despite this, I had no idea what was going to happen to me. All of a sudden, I found myself at the couch in his friend's house, which was not pleasant, and I was watching him engage in something that I didn't want to participate in. I observed him as if he was behaving oddly and didn't speak at all. I'm sorry, don't judge me. You are not familiar with the challenges of dealing with addiction. You are not obligated to judge me by pretending to be better than me. I conveyed my lack of understanding to him by ignoring his concerns. He said things like this to me every day, stating that he is going through difficult times and it's not always about me. My situation altered when I permitted him to drive my car. I had no idea he was okay until I picked him up from work. I aided him in getting. Suddenly, we were driving at 70 miles per hour in a 45 zone on the highway. We collided with a car that was turning in front of us. Afterward, we collided with a cement pole. The sensation was that all the air had been expelled from me. As soon as I got out of the car, paramedics and cops came running to check on me. Someone in the crowd inquired about the driver's location. The reason for Casey's escape from the accident is unknown to me. Fortunately, I didn't experience any bone fractures or major injuries, but rather a concussion that left me with bruises on my entire body. I was told by the police that Casey had numerous legal problems and lacked a driver's license. To tell you, it was the most miserable day of my life. I believe that the lesson others can take from this is to always be alert and observe signs of selfish behavior. My educational background was from a small private college. It was encompassed by the track. It was commonly known as that by both residents and students. I spent the night studying on campus, staying late and doing my homework. It was a typical weeknight around 2 p.m. when I finally decided to go home, which was too late. That year, I resided in the apartments. The college possessed them, and they were situated on a small piece of land near the front gate. Crossing the main road, which had 4 lanes between the campus and another lane, was necessary for me to get there. On the opposite side of the college, there was a crossroads. While walking along the track and getting near the front gate, a van unexpectedly rolled into the campus. It halted at the stop sign and stopped there for a brief period. After a brief moment, the van turned left and drove towards me along the track. Take into account that it was 2 o'clock in the morning and there were no vehicles on the road. The only ones present that night were the ones who stayed with me, but they had all gone home by now. Afterward, I observed that their headlights had turned and then they came back behind me. I found it odd, so I veered off the track and onto the grass. They drove by me near the road's edge. They pulled into the spotlight and turned left as they approached the front gate. It's worth noting that there are 3 ways to get to the apartments I was going to. I could walk along the path to the sidewalk, pass through the front gate, and take the light on the crosswalk. The fact that I was waiting beside the van had already made me feel a bit uneasy. I veered off the track and proceeded to walk along the minor road. This course separated into 2 parts. By heading towards the right, you can easily walk to a parking area that is close to one of the small family-owned restaurants. You could walk straight to the apartments from there. To the left, you go through a tunnel under the main road and then turn onto the opposite side. Afterward, you would walk onto the sidewalk and continue on until you arrive at the apartments. The path descends as I make my way down the small hill. As I looked around, the traffic signal changed to green and the van reverses its way back to the campus. The van travels past the top of the track, turns around once more, and stops at a stop sign along its path. I felt like I was standing there at the split, and they were keeping an eye on me during that time. They could drive me around and block me on the main road before I reached it, regardless of which way I chose. I was fortunate enough to have my mobile phone with me. I stood at the dividing line in the path and phoned for campus security. It felt like the longest period of 3 minutes in history until they arrived. Behind me, the security van was parked. After leaving the car, the security officer waved at me and proceeded to talk to those in the van. They exited the campus and departed. I was given a free ride to the apartment. Nevertheless, they advised me against remaining on campus until the following day. I'm not sure if the van in question was bad, but it was undisguised to me and the security personnel. I appreciate your response.